It's July 29th, 2018, and this is at Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming. Today we're going to focus on Linux gamers' rights, we're going to take a look at ReactOS and the rest of the news, and we're going to ask a question. How many Steam games are playable on Linux anyway? Let's roll. And thanks for joining us for another episode of At Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming, episode 0.18. We're moving up that numbering curve. This week, our featured distribution is Antergos, Gnome 18.7. We're back on Antergos this week. I tested a few other distributions for our weekly distro and they just didn't stick. I tried Debian, I tried Slackware, I haven't tried Gentoo, but they, I just had some problems with various little things that were annoying enough that I decided, I'm going to go back to my base platform of Antergos and use that for our distribution this week. Yeah, so Antergos is what it is. We've talked about it before, so I won't get into it. Our featured video this week is
and Profit. They can play so many different heroes, like Monty mentioned during the pre-show. Just sure whether he plays Orisa or Winston.
Yes, that's our favorite sport. That's the Overwatch League. That was game 1 of the grand final. That's the championship for the Overwatch League, the first season between the Philadelphia Fusion and the London Spitfire, which both are surprise entries into the final. There was it's a 12-team league. 6 teams make it to the playoffs. These guys were ranked number 5 and 6, so big upsets on both sides. I would say most people are picking Philadelphia to win, but that doesn't change the fact that London took game 1. And quite quite firmly as well. The score was 3-1. I have to say the quality of the broadcast is incredible. Activision Blizzard is doing a tremendous job with the Overwatch League. It's very watchable. It is professional. It looks good on the screen, as you can see up there on the upper right. And for the first time ever, an esport was on ESPN, and by the time you're listening to this, it'll be the first time that an esport has been on a major broadcast network in the United States. The final games, the grand final, which are going on Saturday, July 28th, which is today for me, but for you guys in the future, that'll be tomorrow. So it'll already would have happened in terms of who the winner is. But that will be broadcast on ABC. I hope it goes to 3 games. Both teams have had a tremendous run in these playoffs, and I'd like to see it go the full way. For those of you guys that play Overwatch, check it out. For those of you that don't, it's a free weekend, so you can download the game and give it a shot and see what it's all about. Just download and install the Blizzard Net or Battle.net. Fully playable on Linux, by the way. Best way to do it is to run Lutris and install the Battle.net installer, or in Lutris there's an Overwatch installer as well. So just search for Overwatch or Battle.net, install it, and give it a run. Plays very well under Linux. Very well indeed. All the Blizzard games actually play very well on Linux. The Activision games not as much. Destiny 2 is on the Battle.net app as well, but I haven't tried that. But I have not heard anybody mentioning that as being compatible or working, so I wouldn't hold out anything for that. But Overwatch does work. And that is the extent of our small talk today, because we've got big talk to get to. So we're going to take a 10-second break and we'll be back right after this. Thanks for sticking with us. here on App Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming. The first one here that we're going to talk about is ReactOS. ReactOS is now up to alpha version 0.4.9. And for those of you that are not familiar with ReactOS, it is a Windows clone. And these guys have been working on it for, believe it or not, for 20 years. That's when it first started. They're on version 0.4.9. That was released this week. And the purpose of the project is to create a Windows compatible alternative to Windows that's open source. And I won't say they've been making great progress, because the progress has been okay given that it's 20 years of work. But you know what? They are coming together. They've added some additional features to this latest version that you can see on the screen if you're watching the video. And they've improved the stability. They've added some shell improvements and features, and you know, they're slowly improving the compatibility as well. The biggest issue for ReactOS has been drivers, in terms of getting the drivers to work and making do with open source drivers. So for those of you that are on the PeerTube or the YouTube or the Twitch stream, we have installed we've installed it in a KVM, and I'm going to run it right now and we'll take a look at it. So here is ReactOS in all of its glory, as it were. It certainly has the look of Windows XP more so than you know, Vista or 8 or 10. The messaging down here at the bottom right, you can see this is based on NT 5.2, which is not just an older version, but you know, still has quite a bit of compatibility. Now, I have to admit, this is not a very good looking distribution at this point. It is an alpha, as I mentioned before, but it is coming along. You know, it is running. You can see it here. It is not pretty. The background looks pixelated. I believe the reason for this, I'm running it actually at 1600p. I believe I'm running it in a window here, but I believe it's using a standard VGA driver rather than an NVIDIA driver, which would improve it considerably if I could get the NVIDIA driver on. They do have an NVIDIA driver download, and I have installed it, but I didn't fiddle around with it long enough to get it to work. Presumably there is a way to get it to work, and if I got it to work, perhaps this would look a little cleaner on the screen. I have been able to install a number of applications. So over here is the latest version of Firefox, which works. It's a little slow, but it is the latest version, and you can synchronize that up with your Firefox account and be able to access everything that you can on the Linux or regular Windows version. You can see here the performance is slow, but to be fair to ReactOS, I'm running this in a VM. I think I've allocated only 1 gigabyte of RAM. So you know, don't hold the stuttering against it. You know, try to run regular Windows in a 1 gigabyte computer and see what happens. There's a number of applications that are whoa, what is just happening there? ReactOS is going crazy. The system has, unlike Windows, a package manager though, and I really, after whatever number of years of Windows, it always boggles my mind that they have not added a package manager other than the Windows Store, which doesn't even support standard Windows 32 packages. This does have a package manager. I can fix what's going on my screen. I'll try to run it. Let's see if I can close Firefox. That seems to be driving my system crazy. It's not closing. Well, let's just leave it there. You can see I've installed LibreOffice, and that seems to run reasonably well, though I'm getting a big kind of stuttering mess right here, right now. We're back after a reboot. Let's take a look at this. I think the issue there was I hadn't rebooted it in a while, and there might have been some attrition in the memory management, considering that I've only allocated a gig. That was probably a mistake. I should have given it 4, maybe even 8. I went with the default setup on KVM, and that's what it assigned. But let's take a look quickly at the applications manager. You can get a sense of the apps that are available on the system. It's actually it's a pretty good package manager. You know, there's a good selection of applications available right inside of the app manager. I would probably not, you know, I probably wouldn't try to just go out and install random apps. But you know, the ones that I've tested that are in the package manager inside of ReactOS seem to be working reasonably well. You can see the good old-fashioned start menu here. You're not going to be able to to play Steam games and that kind of thing. There are a couple of games that are included on here, like the trusty old Solitaire and so forth. But it's coming along. It's an interesting project. That one of the risks, of course, is that something like Windows is run by Microsoft, and as odd as it may sound, what if someday Microsoft decides to abandon Windows or the older versions of Windows as they're already doing, and then those apps can't run. From the perspective of just maintaining older applications and files, this is a worthy project. This would not be anybody's daily driver. Clearly, it's not a terrific experience. But you know what? It's an interesting thing. That's ReactOS. I wish the guys that are working on it the best of luck, and we'll keep an eye on it down the road. But speaking of new OSs, it looks like SteamOS version 3 is on the way. It's the code name is Clockwerk. You can see here the article on the screen is from Gaming on Linux. Liam Daw put it together. And he says here that Valve are pushing ahead with some major updates to SteamOS with SteamOS 3. Looks like it will be codenamed Clockwerk, continuing their tradition of naming their versions after Dota 2 characters. Valve actually hinted that this was coming with the last update to SteamOS, where they noted that they had updated their build infrastructure. Liam says, I wouldn't expect major changes in how SteamOS actually operates, though, as this will likely involve kernel and GPU driver updates to help SteamOS keep up with modern hardware. It does show that they still believe in it, though. Slow and steady wins the race. Will be fun to see exactly what it includes. I have been a big fan of SteamOS. I have used it. I bought one of the original Alienware Steam machines, version 1. Version 2 was a significant improvement to version 1. Recently, they added some additional driver updates. SteamOS is a worthy project. Many people, many Linux enthusiasts like ourselves, basically, look at it and say, "What is the point? Why don't I just run, Ubuntu or Arch or whatever the distribution that you have, and I can basically run all of that stuff anyway. It's just a SteamOS client, and I can do everything else that I want, and I can set it up on a TV if I want." Yes, you can do everything that you can do on SteamOS on a full desktop operating system, including Linux. But I would just say this to the Linux aficionados out there. people that use Windows can make the same argument vis-a-vis Linux that Linux users can make vis-a-vis SteamOS. Everything you can do on Linux, gaming-wise in particular, you can do on Windows and probably better. So why use Linux? And the reason to use Linux, and I mean everybody that uses Linux knows the reasons, but there are important reasons with respect to usability, speed, privacy, and the experience, which I believe is more conducive to productivity as well than under Windows, and that's why we use Windows. And the same applies for SteamOS. SteamOS is a specific use case, which is a console experience on your television, and so it is designed in that way. I still have my Steam machine hooked up to one of the TVs in the house. There is a great deal of value to turning it on, having the Steam client come in, having little to no interaction from me, not having to worry about drivers or anything, right? And SteamOS is also very important as a base platform for developers to build to. And rather than basically saying to developers from Valve's perspective, support any one of a number of distributions, typically they target Ubuntu. If you target SteamOS, then that is what we will be pushing on our platform. If it works for SteamOS, then you can be assured that it will be on Steam and that you can focus your support on that or on Ubuntu, which is what most developers do. So like I said, I use it. I like it. The other value of SteamOS, in my experience, is the games work. Every game that I've ever run has worked. I've never had a problem with a game. I'm sure that there's some exceptions out there, but a platform that you turn on and you use and you game and you turn off is ideal, and there's nothing else that can do that right now on the PC. Windows can't do that. That is a disaster for a console-like gaming experience, but Microsoft is pushing Xbox for that. And Linux, of course, Linux is an operating system, and an operating system is not a console-like experience. So I am very enthused by the fact that SteamOS continues to operate. I'm often in the SteamOS Reddit as well, helping people that are looking to try it and giving advice and so forth. I believe Gaming on Linux, when they started up, they were focusing quite a bit on SteamOS as well. So we are fans, and it's terrific that it's continuing to move forward. So we've got, the ReactOS stuff on the one hand, then we've got, the SteamOS stuff on the other hand, and I guess the third story on our newsfeed this week will be some news that came out of Microsoft, leaked actually out of one of the, the Microsoft-friendly sites, that Microsoft's next generation Xbox will focus on what they refer to as xCloud game streaming, and that an xCloud service is on the way. And reading here from The Verge, they say that Microsoft is currently developing its next generation Xbox, with recent reports suggesting the console will launch in 2020. Reports are that Microsoft is also working on a second Xbox console that would be limited to streaming games. The streaming-only console will reportedly include a low amount of local compute for handling tasks like controller input. These tasks are essential to reducing latency in game streaming, and Microsoft is said to be planning to slice up processing between the game running locally and in the cloud in order to reduce input lag and other image processing delays. So, this is interesting because we've been hearing about more and more game streaming rather than running the games local for some time now. We've talked about it here on this podcast. We're on episode 18. I'm sure we've talked about it in probably a third of these episodes. It appears to be happening. I've been skeptical at first. But we have seen more and more of it coming together, and the performance appears to be improving over time as well, to the point where by 2020 it may very well be viable. And what Microsoft is doing here is interesting in the sense that they are not doing, a Steam Link type of an approach. They're actually going to embed some hardware with enough juice in the box itself to offload a bunch of the local processing to the local machine, and to probably just offload key streaming components to the cloud. Microsoft runs the Azure cloud, so they have obviously the expertise. But interestingly enough, Xbox does not use Azure, which is kind of strange, right? I mean, you've got this massive cloud infrastructure, but you're not using it on some of your own key applications. I believe Skype isn't using it either. So maybe they're going to transition the next Xbox to Azure, and then they're going to splice up the code. Maybe they're going to splice it up in arrays, so that whatever code gets to you faster, they can send like multiple streams. The one that gets to you faster is the one that will be executed on the local machine. In general, first of all, I have no doubt that Microsoft's going to keep this proprietary, right? They want to sell you games on their system. So being able, while your computer on Linux or on Windows or what have you can likely do this as well as whatever set-top box they want to sell to you, I doubt that they will open up the box or the software and make it run on a Linux machine. They have, though, made some statements that they want to see this running on multiple devices, and I don't see why. I mean, why not have it running on a Linux desktop? You still will be required to buy the games from the Microsoft Store, so that would be the key to them, because they get a cut out of everything that's sold there. So why not, would be my question. And I guess we will see. But if we can get more streaming out there, including projects by NVIDIA, projects by PlayStation, projects by Valve, of course, and Electronic Arts maybe doing something along those lines as well, then if we can get these clients to work on Linux, it really solves one of the big barriers to people coming over to Linux, which is access to AAA gaming. And while that is being addressed, I think, through Wine and DXVK and other Linux-based projects, look, being able to basically run a client and playing whatever game you want is the nirvana for Linux gaming, and streaming maybe a path in that direction. So we'll continue to follow stories on streaming as they develop, because I think it can be positive for Linux gaming. And that's our news feed this week. We'll be back in 10 seconds with our tweets. We're back. Thanks for sticking with us here as we take a look at what we've been tweeting this past week. And there's been a number of interesting stories out there that we've kind of gone back and forth with people on. Let me start off with actually a pretty good news story here, and this is a story that appeared in nag.co, nag.co.za. I wonder if is that New Zealand? I'm not sure what a .za goes to, but Nag Online looks like somebody's blog. The article was written by one Wesley Cataclysmaza Fick. So Wesley Fick this goes back to June 28th, and Wesley writes here about his experience with respect to DXVK and finally getting off the Windows 10 train. And Wesley writes here that he's tried running Manjaro once, but there were issues with my USB 3 ports, the motherboard, and when he tried it in the past, he moved to Ubuntu. He tried a whole bunch of different things on his netbook, on his laptop, on his desktop, and he's always found in the past that he's had problems getting his games to work on Linux, at least satisfactory enough that he would stick there. And so then he says that the impetus for this recent change, where he tried it again, is surprisingly Windows 10 itself. In other words, he's basically saying Windows 10 has finally driven him to come back and give Linux another try. He says the latest upgrade to version 1803 has been a dumpster fire for many, and it's only getting worse for anyone who hasn't installed it on their machines yet. First, the upgrade wouldn't complete on computers running Avast antivirus. Then there were the BSODs and corrupt partitions on Intel and Toshiba solid-state drives. There was freezing issues with Chrome and Edge when running GPU-accelerated workloads in the browser, and the black screen blanking and shader cache issues with the latest NVIDIA drivers. Then people started seeing broken installs, DPC latency spikes that would desync audio, various keys not working. Heck, even Internet Explorer 11 is missing, and that was intentional. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all the reason you have to move over to Linux if you're kind of thinking of doing it. And I hear more and more of these stories about just people having horrific experiences with Windows and then coming over to give Linux a try. And so Wesley basically had enough of that, and he decides to basically give Linux another shot. Talks a little bit here about the transition to Vulkan and OpenGL, and some background on the compatibility layers, and then he dives in through Wine and a program called Lutris, which we have been saying since forever that Wine, DXVK, and Lutris are critical components of transitioning Windows users over to Linux. It's kind of like the bait. Look, you can play many more of your games than you think. Give it a try. And when you basically have a decent enough experience, you'll stick, which is exactly what happened here. So Wesley talks about how easy it was to install Lutris, how it manages Wine, how it's simple to basically install games with Uplay, Bethesda, EA, Origin, and so forth. And then he basically says that suddenly large numbers of games are playable with much higher performance than traditional Wine prefixes would allow. Overwatch, The Witcher 3, Far Cry 4, Crysis 3, Arma 3, and many others are playable with DXVK prefixes. Just a week ago, the release of Wine 3.9 and the staging came with the announcement that they were implementing BKD 3D, a project driven by the Wine team to integrate a DirectX 12 to Vulkan translator, which is true. That's coming, and that would be effectively the rest of the Windows games are now playable. Wesley says, the tipping point has come and gone, and it's finally time for me to move. I kept on using Windows because the alternatives weren't yet in a place that it would be a good idea for me to switch. I kept an eye on how many games were Linux compatible in my Steam library, and I don't buy new ones that weren't. I was biding time, and the only thing that I'd really keep Windows around for is the excellent and beautiful Morza Motorsport 7. For everything else, the Wine project in DXVK has matured to the point where I don't have to stay. 1/3 of my library natively runs in Linux, and the other 2/3 across Steam, Uplay, and Origin will all become compatible in time. Even Forza 7 will one day become playable on Linux because there's a movement to port over the Windows runtime environment into Wine. And he basically says in the rest of his article here, goodbye to Windows and hello to Linux. And Wesley, we are happy to have you. Welcome aboard. Grab yourself some popcorn and listen to our podcast. There's many other podcasts you can listen to. there's a huge community out here for you to basically join. And once you're here, you're one of us, and it's hard to go back. That's Wesley Fick, which then leads to the question of how many Linux games, how many Steam games are playable on Linux now anyway. And we got into a bit of a back and forth with this guy that runs TuxDB. You can see TuxDB's website over here. It's basically a hub for Twitch streams and news on Linux. And this gentleman positions himself as a bit of an aggregator expert on Linux gaming, I guess, app compatibility and so forth. And so in a previous episode, we took a look at the best-selling games on Steam for 2018. Let me see if I can get it on screen here. Best-selling Steam games 2018, which were released a while ago. And in one of our episodes, I don't remember which one off the top of my mind right now, we basically showed this this list, which is a list of the top sellers for 2018 on Steam. And there's a list of platinum and gold and silver and bronze. There's roughly, looks like 16 games in the silver category, and then 12 in each of platinum and gold. And so what we've done is we've taken a look at these games, and we basically said, look, in terms of the platinum games, Warframe runs, Counter-Strike runs, Vermintide runs. Granted, the Windows games are running through, Wine or DXVK or both, but they run. Which one is this one? This is Grand Theft Auto 5, runs. Kingdom Come Deliverance, it runs. And so you go through these, and the only ones that I know for sure do not run, actually, the ones I know for sure run are basically everything here, except for Far Cry 5, which I have not tested, so let's kind of put that there as not running. I know that Assassin's Creed Origin doesn't run, so let's assume that's a Ubisoft game. That's the same thing. Rainbow Six Siege also does not run, and PUBG doesn't run. So that's 3 games, which means that 9 of these 12 work under Linux, either natively or through something like Lutris, DXVK, Wine, Play Online, whatever you have. That's 75%. No, sorry, 9 out of 12 is 75%. Got to get my numbers right there as well. When you look at the gold numbers, I think I came up with a number of 67%. The silver numbers are closer to about 70%, and then bronze is even higher, because as you get to the indie-friendly games, more and more of them are actually native on Linux or just work. So when we took a look at these numbers, yeah, granted, it's anecdotal, I'll give you that, but these are the most popular games on Steam. And I'm going to guess, I bet you 90% of all of the hours played on Steam are these lists right here. So, my view, again, anecdotal, is that, look, somewhere between, if you are a typical gamer that plays typical games, roughly 1/3 of your games are going to be native. Let's say 25% to 1/3. And that's my experience, and that's the experience of Wesley's, and that's the experience of most people that are out there. You take a look at your typical library, and depending on who you are, the typical user is going to be probably between 1/4 and 1/3 of their library. And then with DXVK, particularly with DXVK, it looks like anywhere between another 1/3 to maybe 1/2 of the rest of the games will be playable. And I'm going to say that is conservative, because my experience, and I've played a lot of games, you can see my Lutris library here, I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games, and out of every 10 that I try, I'm going to say maybe 2 or 3 just do not work at all. And some might require some tweaking, on Lutris in particular, or somewhere else. But if you take a look at my games right here, right now, and I don't have a huge install, everything here works, and many of them are Windows only games, and pretty well everything that I want to play is working right now. I would have very little issue in terms of saying, typical user is going to have anywhere between 2/3 and 70%. Let's say 60 to 70% of their library will be Linux playable. And so this guy TuxDB basically took extreme aggressive offense to that statement. And I guess there was no reason. I wasn't being rude back. I wasn't being mean back. I wasn't basically calling him names or anything. But the guy had, he was pretty aggressive and basically saying that's nonsense. That, if you take a look at the facts, which as he saw it are his database at TuxDB, plus WineDB, plus, other sources like that, the list is quite a bit smaller. And I don't dispute that. I don't dispute that those databases do not show the numbers that I'm talking about, but I can tell you that those databases are old, and they're not updated, and they're not accurate. And I'm not sure that relying on bad data is better than relying on the anecdotes that I provided, because if you go to Reddit, there was a thread there that talked about people and their experience with Linux gaming, and their experiences were similar to mine. And I can tell you, right up here in terms of, for example, games like Dark Souls Remastered, that does not have a Lutris installer. That is not listed, in terms of the databases out there, as far as I can tell. And yet there it is, and it's running. And there's a lot of other games that are just not updated. So you take a look at the data, and it's not going to show the extent of the compatibility of the games, because at this point, at this stage of DXVK, in conjunction with Wine and other similar projects, most games are playable at good frame rates, not just kind of acceptable frame rates, good frame rates, fully playable under Linux. And there's been a number of articles on Forbes about this one reporter's transition over. And I hope that, and I know that guy is going to be talking to the TuxDB guy, I hope that we do not get a skewed view of Linux gaming. I did forward the reporter over to Liam Daw, who I think is a better representative of the community than either myself, frankly, or this TuxDB guy. Liam, sometimes drinks the juice in terms of really pushing Linux native gaming, and that's that's fine. I have no issue with that, or with Liam. But we take a slightly different view that gaming on Linux should be accessible to whoever wants to use it, using whatever they do, they want to kind of use. And our view, and I think others agree to a large part, is that, look, having a terrific experience on Linux is much more important to encouraging a greater number of Linux users that will then increase the user base and provide further native Linux games, rather than the very small community that we have rallying around and shaming people into not buying any Windows games or running Wine, so that we could help developers increase their revenues in Linux. And I again, my view has always been, and I've discussed it in the past, that even if every Linux gamer bought all of their games, native Linux games, it probably would make a marginal difference to their numbers anyway. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our focus on topic, which is Linux gamers' rights. So anyway, I think it's an interesting ongoing discussion in terms of Wine and Linux and Lutris and and running VMs and dual booting and all of that kind of thing that I think is not going to go away. But respectful dialogue is the key for us, in the Linux community. Look, we find this in a lot of different, niche markets where, the small numbers of believers, the long tail people that can find themselves and each other in communities on the internet much better now than they could have, let's say, 20 or 30 years ago. Tend to get into kind of dogmatic wars of purity, right? And rather than focusing on the many things that they have in common, they focus on the small number of things that they disagree about, which is not productive. Now, one of the things that maybe many of us won't disagree with is the Nintendo Switch, which is really an excellent platform. I got one of my own on launch day, and one of the we're getting some sound there. Okay, one of the main issues that I have with it is, on the positive, it is a terrific platform for handheld gaming. It's not as good for a big screen experience, but it is just such a wonderfully designed handheld, and a worthy successor to the 3DS and the DS and the Game Boy Advance before that. Very, very well designed, very smart by Nintendo's on Nintendo's part to find this opening and really drive people through. Now, one of the complaints that I have is that games that would sell for $30 or $40 everywhere else are selling for $60 US on the Switch store or the Nintendo store. And I recently purchased an RPG called Octopath Traveller, which is very much an old style kind of 16-bit type RPG, certainly inspired, and I've got a picture here on the screen, by those old school Final Fantasy type games. And if you can see the picture, if you're on the video, we've seen games like this on Steam. We've seen games like this on PC, and they're selling for like $20. And this game in Canada, it's $80. With taxes, I paid over $90 Canadian for this game, which is crazy. I mean, every time I want to buy a game on the Switch, I take a look at it and I either kind of pinch myself so that I don't scream out of pain at the price and scream out out of pain for something else, or I just don't buy it. I think I may have 5 games on the Nintendo Switch. The pricing is outrageous because it is a proprietary system, and they have a good number of games like this which are exclusive to the system. So if you want to play it, tough luck, come up with the cash. But one of the benefits that they've been having is that many of the publishers that support Linux as well, usually because their games are developed on Unity, which has native Linux support, are rushing over to the Switch and developing and releasing their games over there, often at a pretty significant premium to what the prices that they're available on Steam or GOG or what have you, and selling quite well, certainly outselling whatever they're doing on Linux. And this is, it could be troubling. If they are focusing on the larger volume of dollar sales on Switch rather than on either Steam, frankly, PC Steam, or Linux Steam. On the other hand, though, it could be a good thing because many of these games are Unity. if you can basically develop more games on Unity and then port them over to the Switch, maybe the port over to Linux is also in the works, because it's an easy port. Octopath Traveller, and I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure that runs on the Unreal Engine, which also has Linux support, but is not as it's not as easy to translate projects from Unreal to Linux as easy, at least, as it is from Unity. And even recently, I've been reading some stories that concern me about recent developments in Unity that make it more difficult to support Linux. And again, that's one of the issues with respect to our focus on topic this week. But my tweet here is, I mean, I bought it and it's on my playlist, but $90 for a game like this, I'm not sure whether I should be impressed or disgusted with Nintendo, on that front. And I think I'm firmly somewhere in between, both kind of awe and disgust, in part because while I'm disgusted, I should be disgusted at myself for putting up the money, but the fact that I put up the money impresses me. So that's Octopath Traveller. We'll come back in 10 seconds with the Discovery Queue. And we're back with the Discovery Queue. Let's see what's new for Linux gaming. This week I did a search on GOG as well, and there was no new games released on the Linux platform via GOG. So let's kind of take a look here and see what the Discovery Queue on Steam is telling us. Basically here, I'm just going, they have a feature here where you can basically take a look at what's new in your Discovery Queue, and they basically have a list of 10 games that are programmatically determined to be of interest to you and new. I'm not really sure how their algorithm works. But the first game on our list is something called Jolly Battle. It's a $2 game, $2 Canadian. It's 40% off right now. It looks, looks like a phone game. So let's take a pass on that. Next game here is something called Space Hamster in Turmoil. This is 20% off. It's $4.50 on Steam Canadian. Let's just take a quick look, just because it looks so crazy here on the video. All right, not much to hear there, so let's just kind of mute the sound. Space Hamster in Turmoil is a shoot 'em up featuring a customizable ship, optional and unorthodox mechanics, 7 interesting bosses, and a short story that takes place 1 year after the extinction of our species. Space Hamster in Turmoil, that launched July 24th, available for Linux. The next game is Have You Seen My Robot, which looks like might be an M-rated game, because it's asking me for my age here. In this 6-hour comedy special, okay, this is a video. I really hate the fact that they show me videos in my Discovery Queue. Sword Art Online is another video. So that's, of the 4 so far, they're 1 for 4 of having any interest for me in their algorithm. Here's an actual game. It's Werewolves Haven Rising. That's another $4. It's 34% off. Launched a few days ago. Rise up, werewolves. Throw off the shackles of a tyrannical military police state. Fight for your pack. Fight for your honor. Fight for your freedom. Taking a look to see if there's a video here. Is it a text-based adventure? RPG adventure. Play as male, female, or non-binary, gay, straight, or bisexual. Very inclusive game. Minimal. I mean, I you know what? I'm just taking a look at the screen here. It looks like it's a choose-your-own-adventure game. So text-based choose-your-own-adventure game. Next game on our list here is Don't Bite Me Bro. Don't Bite Me Bro. Don't Bite Me Bro is a 1 to 4 player couch co-op open world zombie apocalypse game. Explore the world for resources, find and save survivors, blah blah blah. It's a buck. Pass. Chromasia Rock Paper Tactics is the next game on the list. This is an actual kind of $17 game, released July 11th. Simplified combat that maintains depth for our beloved veterans. Unique rock, paper, scissors mini game that adds more excitement every battle. Choose your own path with 8 different endings. Let's take a quick look here at the trailer. All right, let's do it again. Nexus Games. So enough. All right, so I'm going to pass on that one. So far, a very good record here for your algorithms, Valve. Hero U Rogue to Redemption. This released July the 10th. Hero U Rogue to Redemption is a role-playing adventure game by Laurie and Corey Cole, creators of the acclaimed Quest for Glory series. Players take on the role of Sean O'Connor, at Hero University. Sean will make friends, explore the haunted castle, and use his rogue skills for fun and profit. That's a $40 game. So maybe we're gonna give you guys a chance to show us your your actual trailer here. If you think it's worth $40, take a look. Okay, I think we get the drift there. Isometric, top-down, RPG. Geez, for $40 though. I mean, is this going to be competitive with something like Pillars of Eternity 2? I don't know. I mean, the reviews here are positive. All reviews. It's got about 47 reviews. Transistor Games. Gosh, guys, you know what? I'm a guy that just paid $90 for a game on my Switch, but I don't know. I'm not. I wouldn't pay $40 for this right now. It's not on sale or anything. I'm going to add it to my wish list, and we'll take a look again. If it's at a significant discount, we'll take another look. And maybe that is the value of the Switch, right? You've only got so many games. You want to play something there. The game is $90. What alternative do you have? In any case, last game on our list is called Bernie's Nightmare. This came out July 28th, which is today. It's an interactive horror journey inside a person's nightmare. This game is $2. So I'm not going to give it too much time, but it is by a person or gentleman or company called Kevin Yang Games. And that's it. We have a couple more. We got two more here. Kill Skills. Kill Skills. Sure. Let's pass on it. Okay, so both of the last two games were kind of not looking that impressive anyway. So anyway, that's the Discovery queue. It doesn't look like there is a lot of stuff out there this week. Again, like I said, there was nothing on GOG. A few interesting things here on Steam. In terms of my gameplay, like I mentioned earlier, I played a little bit of Octopath Traveller on my Switch. Really want to get back to Pillars of Eternity 2 and Final Fantasy 12. Maybe pick up a little bit of the Dark Souls Remastered, and but I'm kind of a little short on time. The other, I would love, I also spent a little time with Warhammer 40,000 Gladius, Relics of War. Not enough to really have much of a judgment. It reminds me of kind of a combination between, a real-time strategy game, your typical game out there, and something like, let's say, Civilization. A little more like Civilization than I expected it to be. But I liked it based on my first kind of crack at it. Certainly a worthy addition. But man, there's a lot of Warhammer games out there these days, isn't there? Anyway, that's our Discovery queue. We'll be back here in a couple of seconds with our focus on topic this week, which is Linux gamers' rights. And we're back with our focus on topic this week, which is Linux gamers' rights. I'm going to begin here by reading an article from Gaming on Linux. Again, this was published by Liam Daw, July 27th, 2018, www.gamingonlinux.com. I support Liam's Patreon. You should too. Go over there, find him, support him, give him some money. He's doing a great job for the Linux community. So I'm just going to read his article here, and with apologies to Liam for using his content on the podcast. But I'm sure that anybody that wants to basically take a closer look will go to your website. And so here's his article. The headline is, Facepunch are no longer selling the Linux version of the survival game Rust. Sad news, Facepunch are no longer selling the Linux version of their survival game Rust after removing mentions of Linux support yesterday from their Steam page. I'm just reading here from the website for those on the audio. Linux support has been available in Rust since 2013, along with continued support during early access and after the official release earlier this year. It was a bit of a surprise that we got an email from a reader to mention that in the Steam store page for Rust, was no longer showing the SteamOS Linux icon or listing it in the system requirements. Thinking it was a mistake, since nothing was announced, I, being Liam Daw, reached to Facepunch, to which they replied with, "Hey dude, yeah, we stopped selling Rust for Linux." I did request more information as to why, and will update this article if I receive any further information. To be fair, they haven't had a lot of time to respond again yet, but I feel it's important to get the word out. And then he kind of, does some speculation here before he heard back from them, and he gets an update from Garry, which responded on Twitter and said this. This is from Garry, whatever his name is, the guy from Rust, and Garry's Mod, I guess. We stopped selling Rust on Linux because we don't give it to the let me start again. We stopped selling Rust on Linux because we don't give it the QA support it needs. There are situations where there's a Unity Linux bug that pops up and we ship with it because it's the right decision for 99.99% of our players. And while 60% of Linux users are fine with this, they understand their position in this world, it's probably not the right thing to act like it's fine. So while we're still going to ship Linux updates and keep it up to date, we're not going to sell it anymore. Also, Linux community. Being abusive, demanding, rude to the few developers actually shipping games to your favorite OS isn't the way to go. It makes me regret ever shipping Linux versions. And Linux then goes on to say, I've said it before and I will say it again, developers are human. People do need to understand that and not to resort to throwing insults around right away. Even so, if you sell a game on any platform, you should be doing QA on it. There's no excuse for not doing it. And then there's a second update here that basically says, from another developer on Reddit, this is a different developer who commented on this point and said, Linux is and will still be supported, but the decision to remove Linux from purchase was mainly based on multiple issues in the current Unity version. We're currently unable to downgrade to a Unity version which corrects these Linux issues, and we're unable to upgrade Unity to 2018.2 due to a number of new issues. Linux is in a state of limbo in which we're unable to resolve. Instead of selling a broken platform, we decided to remove it from purchase but still offer it to existing players. Once Linux is in a working state, we'll review the decision. So that's the impetus for this story. And I can tell you that I'm of mixed feelings of it, similar to many of you guys out there. But the question here is really this attitude by this guy, Garry, right? He basically, blames, first of all, the 40% of the community, which is an outrageously large number, and that I do not believe for a second represents the real number. And then he basically says that, let me just kind of repeat this quote. Linux community. Being abusive, demanding, rude to the few developers actually shipping games to your favorite OS isn't the way to go. It makes me regret ever shipping Linux versions. And my gut reaction to that is the hell with you and your ilk. We do not need to suck up to every developer in the world that basically favors us. The point here is that somehow, the market is broken and he is doing us a favor by shipping a game on Linux, and that we should just basically accept their crappy, broken ass, non-QA'd games, and thank him and say, more master, thank you, master. Which is outrageous for any business person to ever take a position like that with even the smallest number of their users. Even the one user, that complains should get better treatment than what this prick shouted out to us. Which leads to the questions then. Liam's view is one approach, and he's kind of hedging his bets a little bit here as well by basically saying, that developers are human and we need to be nicer to them and that kind of a thing. And actually, when Liam and I first interacted, it was over, not this particular issue, but a similar issue where somebody on Steam complained to a developer about a broken Linux version, respectfully in that particular case, and then was attacked by the developer in a manner similar to what Garry is doing here. And Liam posted there something generally that I took to be supportive of the developer over the user. And so then I tagged Liam, and then we kind of got a little nasty there for a while. But the view is, okay, so certainly there's very many shades of gray here, right? Between being a complete and utter a-hole, which nobody would defend, except for maybe the complete and utter a-hole themselves. But to say that that's 40% of the community, I think is outrageous. I would say whatever the number is in Linux is probably greater in Windows. You know, ship a crappy ass broken game on Windows via Steam and see what happens there, my friends. Okay, we do tend to take a little more abuse than your Windows counterparts do, for the very reason that we have less choice in terms of gaming, and so we tend to want to be happy with what we get. But at what point is it valid to say to somebody, this is crap, and I paid my money and I deserve the support that I paid for or a refund? And by saying that, are we hurting Linux gaming? What rights do we have as Linux gamers? And I'll tell you my view, and it's my view for what it's worth. Okay? If you sell a game on Linux, it has to work. Period. Okay? And if we complain because your Linux game does not work, then you should fix it. Or give us our money back. And just like any other customer that buys any product, we should be demanding what was promised, and really nothing more. If they promise, you know, a cracker and they give you a cracker, then that is what you should be getting and not asking for more. But if they promise you a slice of bread and they give you a cracker, you should have, you know, the right to basically go back and say, look, you promised me a slice of bread and you gave me a cracker and I want my bread that I paid for. If that is not being abusive to a developer. That is not being rude, and that is not being wrong. That is being an advocate for yourself, for your, you know, having the developer respect you as a customer and your money, no matter what platform you're on. And to the extent that there is a large number of Linux users that will only buy Linux native games, you know, forcing them to have the worst possible experience because, you know, they need to suck up for getting broken games because those are the only games that they will play is abusive. And I would rather, for one, have a developer not release any game rather than a broken ass piece of crap that doesn't work that I've spent my money on. Okay, because if they don't ship the game, at least I've got my money. But if they do ship the broken ass game, then I don't have my money and I really don't have the game because it doesn't work. So I'm no better off. And that's not a very good transaction for either party. Okay, because you've sold me something that doesn't work and have my money, and I don't have my money to play something to reward a developer that does support a game that does work. So we've hurt the Linux community by encouraging developers to sell us broken crap and then not standing up for our rights. Now, I don't think Liam or anybody else is basically saying not, you know, we shouldn't stand up for our rights, and certainly Liam is not saying that in his post here. But you know, there is a line between respectful and demanding and being a complete prick, and that can be a wide gap. Being demanding is not being a prick. Okay, being demanding to the extent that you are asking for what you were promised is correct, and we Linux gamers should support that. Now, going beyond that and getting abusive, threats, you know, that nobody supports that, and nobody is even saying that this happened in this situation. This developer is being abusive, and we should admonish him for it. Now, somebody else did come back up with that second post that I mentioned, which was the real reason that they stopped supporting it and selling it, which apparently is because of a switch in Unity that creates compatibility issues. And that is a big deal for us Linux gamers, but it has nothing to do with whatever this Garry dude was talking about. Okay, he went out of his way to create this narrative about abusiveness, right, for people standing up for what they paid for. And I, for one, will never buy anything, whether it's on Windows or Linux, for this guy again. Okay, I buy games on every platform, and many of us, I think what he is ignoring here is many of us are not dogmatic Linux users. We buy games across a wide number of platforms, including Windows and consoles and switches and everything else. Okay, and you may think we're a small market over here in the Linux community, and you can attack us, and that we're going to basically ask you to just, you know, more master kind of thing. But that's not the case, my friend. Okay, you're going to piss us off for being abusive to us and to our fellow Linux community members, and we will not buy your games. We will not buy your games on any platform, and we will basically help to have other people feel the same way. Because if you treat us this way, chances are you treat other people this way as well. Okay? This is no different than somebody that bullies people that are in a weak position. And bullies require you to stand up. And bullies typically stand down when the numbers get big enough. Right? So again, I have Rust. I haven't played it because it's a broken ass piece of crap that doesn't work in any case. Right? But you took my money, Gary, and now you admit that the game is broken. And perhaps you're admitting that you're just going to basically provide some updates so that you don't have at least the moral right to give me my money back. But I would like my money back if possible. And maybe I'll put together a Steam refund request and see what happens. So I guess, you know, the conclusion here is, you know, look, we should always be respectful of other people. We should always be polite but firm. When we are dealing with a difference of expectation between what was promised and what we have, but we shouldn't cower behind threats of developers doing us a favor and that we should basically accept their crap. Okay, we should be firm, we should be we should be demanding, and we should support each other when we are being respectful and demanding, rather than attacking each other. Right? If somebody is being firm but demanding and asking for what they paid for, we should not admonish that person, you know, on the fear that the developer might no longer support our platform. We should demand that we get what we pay for and let that developer know that we will pay for more of their games if they make us good with what they are delivering. And if they don't, we won't buy their games on any platform. I would, as usual, you know, kind of, if you have comments, thoughts, posts, you know, we've got our subreddit, r/mostly_Linux, or you can send us an email at mostlylinux@protonmail.com. We'll be back in 10 seconds here with some final thoughts. Thanks for sticking with us. Here on our final thoughts, I haven't done the editing yet, obviously, because I'm still recording the podcast. So I'm not sure the length, but like I said, in editing, I'll try to keep it down to an hour. I've been trying to move things along a little quicker this time. Appreciate any feedback from anybody. I did get some feedback on Reddit last week, and thank you very much for providing that feedback. We take all constructive criticism to heart, just like we you know, advise our developer community to do so when we complain about their games. We're all over the place on the web. You can follow us on mostly_Linux on Twitter. We've got our subreddit, mostly_Linux. We've got our Steam Gamer group, Mostly Linux. We've got our Twitch channel, Mostly Linux. We've got our YouTube channel, Mostly Linux, and we've got a Proton email, mostlylinux@protonmail.com, and we've got a PeerTube channel, Mostly Linux. So searching Mostly Linux should get you access to our content, including through our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and everything else out there. If you are, you know, a regular viewer, watcher, listener, please give us like a positive thumbs up wherever you are at, and let's get the word out. In any case, that's episode 0.18. It's a wrap, and we will be back next week with episode 0.19 here on Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming. See you next week.